In Cook County, specifically in the 1970s, there was a gay killer who lured children and boys to his house with a trick. Inside his house, the victims were subjected to a series of crimes that began with rape and often ended with murder. At the end of that decade, the Chicago community was shocked and they learned that John Wayne Gacy, the owner of many social and humanitarian initiatives, was behind these crimes. John Wayne Gacy is an American serial killer and rapist who was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17, 1942. He is the owner of PDM Company, Democratic Circle captain, and member of a number of local clubs. He was known as Pogo or Patches the Clown because he impersonated these characters in hospitals and celebrations. He was involved in the rape and murder of at least 33 people, the majority of whom were children. Childhood. As a child, John suffered from his father's harsh treatment. His alcoholic father repeatedly beat him in the basement of the house and called him bad words, such as, "You are stupid and foolish." His father also compared him to his sisters and called him gay. What John remembers from that period is that one day his father beat him with a razor wire because he had messed around with arranging the parts of the car at a young age. Faints began to haunt John, in addition to appendicitis, which required his transfer to the hospital and his stay there several times. As a result, his academic level decreased due to his absence from school, and his father thought that he was lying. In his last year of high school, after moving between 4 schools, John dropped out of school and began his working life, where he held many jobs. One of them was interesting, later, a job as an assistant in a morgue. He worked at Palm Memorial Mortuary. His job required transporting bodies from the hospital to the funeral home. The salary for the job was not enough to obtain independent housing, so he was allowed to sleep in the hospital building. While doing this, John learned how to clean and embalm corpses. However, he was not a regular employee. He used to do some strange things at night. When he was alone in the building, John would examine the bodies and talk to them. Not only that, but he would take off their clothes and place them next to the coffin. John continued like this until one day the manager suspected him and reported him to the police, so he was fired from work. Some believe that John used his experience in this job to hide his crimes later. In August 1967, John sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees. 6 months after the incident, Donald Voorhees told his father about it, who immediately reported it to the police. Police arrested John and charged him with sexual assault on Donald and attempted assault on 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Of course, he rejected these charges and requested a lie detector test. At his request, he was given a test, but John was nervous while answering the questions and failed the test. On November 7, 1968, he admitted that he was involved in the Donald Voorhees case, but was not convicted of the remaining charges. On December 3, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison in Anamosa State. On June 18, 1970, John was granted parole after spending 18 months in prison. He was placed under surveillance for a year, and his release included some conditions, which were that he moved to live with his mother in Chicago and not wander around, curfew system, after 10 p.m. On February 12, 1971, John was accused of sexually assaulting a teenager, luring him into his car at a Greyhound station in Chicago and taking him home before raping him. The court dropped the case because the boy did not appear. On June 22 of the same year, a young man filed a complaint against him and claimed that he tricked him by using his police badge to get into his car and then sexually assaulted him. John was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual assault and reckless conduct. But these charges were dropped after the prosecutor tried to blackmail him. In the 1970s, John Wayne Gacy tried to gain power and status in order to gain trust and put himself beyond suspicion. This is so that he can achieve his goal. He had to make a change in his life. The process of change began with his move from Chicago to the town of Norwood Park, located in Cook County. In the village of Norwich, John bought a house with financial help from his mother and founded a construction company in Chicago called BDM. He then volunteered to be the captain of the Democratic Circle in his area, and held many parties that were attended by more than 400 people, including a number of officials. Because he was a member of the local Moose Club, he was able to join the Clown Club and created his characters Pogo or Patches the Clown in late 1975. Those changes that occurred in his personality were not a positive indicator, because during that period when he was doing good deeds, he was committing more serious crimes than he had done previously. It was at his new home in Cook County that John Wayne Gacy carried out all the murders, and buried the majority of his victims there. He targeted children and boys through personal acquaintance or randomly. His hunting areas for his victims were the Greyhound bus station in Chicago, the Bug House Square, and also the streets. He also tricked his victims with several tricks, including promises of a job in his company, and that he would give them a lot of money through his work there. On the evening of January 2, 1972, 16-year-old Jack McCoy was at the Greyhound bus station in Chicago wanting to go to his father's house in Omaha, Nebraska. That evening, John left a family party and went to the same bus station. Jack convinced McCoy to get into his car, took him on a sightseeing tour, and then drove him home. He told him that he could spend the night at his house and promised that he would take him back to the station in time for his bus to arrive later. John claimed that when he woke up the next morning, he found Jack standing at the entrance to his room, holding a knife in his hand. John thought that Jack wanted to kill him, so he attacked him, and when he was trying to get the knife out of his hand, Jack was telling him that he was wrong and that he had understood the matter in the wrong way, and unintentionally he tilted his hand, which injured John's forearm, and then he pulled the knife from Jack's hand and struck him. He hit his head against the wall of the room and then kicked him into his closet. Here, Jack hit him in the stomach, but John dropped him to the ground and stabbed him in the chest several times. Then he buried him under his house and covered his grave with a layer of cement. In January 1974, John killed again, but the victim remains unidentified. In his confessions, John stated that he strangled the victim until she died and then put the body in his closet before burying it. On July 31, 1975, an 18-year-old John Wayne Gacy Corporation, PDM, employee named John Butkovich disappeared. His car was found near the Sheridan and Lawrence station, and it contained his coat, wallet, and car keys. The day before he disappeared, John Butkovich claimed 2 weeks of back pay. Based on a later confession, John Wayne said his employee Butkovich approached his car and said, "I want to talk to you." John Wayne invited him into the car and then took him home under the pretext of ending the back pay issue. At his house, he offered him a drink, then surprised him and tied his hands behind his back. He then sat on his chest before suffocating him to death. Finally, he buried the body under a concrete floor in the garage. John the Assassin. In 1976, John Wayne Gacy got divorced for the second time. Some of his neighbors noticed changes in his behavior after the divorce. Between 1976 and 1978, he committed most of his crimes and then transformed from a killer into a serial killer. He says that after his separation from his wife, he found greater freedom to implement his plans. In 1976, his crimes reached their peak, with the number of his victims estimated at 15 people. One of those victims is a 17-year-old PDM employee named Gregory. Before his disappearance, Gregory informed his family that John had asked him to do some repair work on his house. But later, Gregory's car was found in an area called the Nile. His parents and older sister called John, but the latter claimed that he had run away from home and also told his family that he had received a letter from Gregory shortly after his disappearance. The family asked for the letter, but John said he deleted it. In 1977, John committed 10 crimes, including 9 murders and rape, one of which was limited to rape and torture only. The only victim to survive that year was 19-year-old Robert Donnelly. John kidnapped him from a Chicago bus station at gunpoint. At his home, John tortured and raped Robert, then immersed his head in a bathtub until he passed out. Hours later, he took him to his workplace, released him, and then told him not to report it to the police, because they would not believe him. The following year, Robert reported the assault to the police and John was interrogated on January 6, 1978, but the criminal evaded justice after making false allegations that the police believed. The year 1978 marked the end of John Wayne Gacy's crime spree. That year, John committed 7 crimes, including 6 murders and rape, including one survivor as well. Among these crimes, one was the reason for revealing the truth about the criminal to the authorities, which was the murder and rape of 15-year-old Robert Best. On the afternoon of December 11, John visited Nissan Pharmacy in Des Plaines to discuss a business deal with the store owner. Closer to Robert Best, John said his company often gives its teenage employees a starting wage of $5 an hour. In other words, nearly twice as much as Robert. Shortly after John left, Robert's mother arrived to take her son home, as was her custom. But Robert asked his mother to wait because, he said, some contractors wanted to talk to him about a good-paying job. He left the store at 9 p.m. and promised his mother to return soon. After 10 p.m., at John's house, the criminal handcuffed Robert, then tortured and raped him. Then he tied a rope around Robert's neck, who was crying in fear. Meanwhile, John received a phone call from an acquaintance regarding business, and simply left Robert choking to death on his bedroom floor. Investigations. When Robert Best didn't return home, his family filed a missing persons report with Des Plaines Police. After examining the records and investigating the people who visited Robert's workplace, the name of John Wayne Gacy was brought up, and a search of his record revealed that he had a pending charge in Chicago and was imprisoned for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old teenager. 3 Des Plaines police officers visited John's home the next evening, and after questioning, he admitted that he had gone to the pharmacy and seen 2 young men working there, but denied that he had offered Robert Best a job. He also reported that he returned to the pharmacy after 8 p.m. because he had forgotten his appointment book. He promised to come to the police station and record his statement. The next day, John came to the police station and denied that he had any hand in Robert Best's disappearance and confirmed that he had not offered him a job. John was asked again why he returned to the pharmacy, and he repeated his statement that the owner of the pharmacy, Mr. Torv, called him and told him that he had forgotten his appointment book. This trick did not fool the investigators, as they called Torv and denied that this had happened. Here the investigators asked John to write a statement explaining his whereabouts on September 11. After John lied in his statement, investigators became suspicious that he was keeping Robert Best inside his home. On December 13, investigators obtained a search warrant for John Wayne Gacy's home. Inside the house, they found several suspicious items, such as police badges, a 6mm Privatata pistol, a number of handcuffs, children's clothes, and a syringe and needle in the bathroom cabinet. In the bedroom, investigators found a ring from West High School engraved with the initials of someone's name, JAS, and they also found a nylon rope 91 centimeters long. Accordingly, a number of surveillance teams were assigned to follow the movements of John Wayne Gacy. After another extensive search of his home, the police informed John that they had found human remains inside his home and immediately charged him with murder. On the morning of December 22, in the presence of his lawyer, John Wayne Gacy admitted that he had killed nearly 30 children and boys. He gave some names of his victims and claimed that he did not remember the majority of the names. John stated that he buried most of his victims, who numbered 26 people, under his house. As for the rest of the victims, he buried some of them on his property and threw others into the Des Plaines River. As for Robert Best, he admitted that he lured him to his home and strangled him until he died on the evening of December 11. He then said he disposed of the body in the Des Plaines River early on December 13. On February 6, 1980, John Wayne Gacy was tried in Cook County, Illinois and found guilty of 33 murders and sexual assault. On March 11, John Wayne Gacy was sentenced to death. On the morning of May 9, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center, ending the story of one of the most dangerous serial killers in the United States of America in particular and the world in general. And here we have reached the end. Like and subscribe.